John, I would like you to talk a little bit about the benefits of bargaining councils, because lately it appears that people are trying to abandon, currently we know of the type of crisis that the MEIBC is in. And I would like for you to spell out to people what are the benefits. But before you do that, something very interesting. If you read the history of bargaining councils, you would know that all that happened in 1922 with the Rand Revolt was caused by the mining industry, the problems in the mining industry. But they've never formed a bargaining council. I remember my days when I was still the General Secretary of the Building Bargaining Council. They came to me on a number of occasions and asked me, explain to us the benefits of a bargaining council. Now, in the meantime, we've seen horrific things, if we think about Marikana and all that. And yet, in 2017, nearly 100 years after they started all the trouble, they're still without a bargaining council. So could you elaborate a little bit on the benefits of bargaining councils, and perhaps even, if you want to be so brave, to make a few comments about, if they had a bargaining council, could it be that Marikana would have been a bit different?
It's interesting that you go back into history, and particularly the history of the 1922 revolt here, because my grandfather was the General Secretary of the Reduction Workers Union and was one of the leaders of the 1922 revolt, and was the person who stimulated my interest in labour law and labour dispute resolution and the like. And I think it's an interesting question you make, because I don't think the magic is in the word bargaining council. The magic is in centralised industry level bargaining, which can take place in a bargaining council, but as we've seen over many years, can take place outside of a bargaining council in a voluntary industry level centralised bargaining arrangement, as has happened between the Chamber of Mines and the Mine Workers Union, and in time with NUM. And there are pros and cons of that. But many of the benefits that I'm going to describe about bargaining councils also apply in the informal mining centralised bargaining. And yes, I think there is no doubt at this time of crisis for bargaining councils, we tend to focus on many of the negative aspects which I've mentioned, of one size fits all and the like. But there are enormous benefits to be gained out of centralised industry level bargaining in bargaining councils. And just some of the ones which come to mind is, firstly, you are able in a bargaining council to maximize the utilization of resource. So the bargaining council has the financial resource to do a lot of the research that is so essential for intelligent bargaining. It's able to do a lot of the training, and we've given the example of the road freight industry, that it's able to provide the negotiation skills training at a high level for the leadership of both labour and employers. It's able to do the economic literacy training. It's able to do the numeracy and literacy training. So there's a capacity there which it's not easy for the average small company to provide. Also, it is able to utilize a team of negotiators from both sides of the table that have been very highly trained and skilled, and I go back again to the road freight example, whereas your average small company just doesn't have the resource to skill up its HR people to take on particularly a union negotiator who's negotiating every day with a variety of companies. So one of its biggest features is resource. The other thing is that there are certain issues which are far better negotiated and agreed to at industry level because of economies of scale. So, for example, benefit funds, you can probably get a far better, more economic, cost-effective medical aid, or provident fund, or a safety or a skills training. All of those kind of issues can be agreed to at an industry level far more economically than they could be agreed to in 1,000 companies within an industry. So the appropriate use of economies of scale is very important. And in a way, allied to that, it's very difficult for an individual company to afford effective dispute resolution, to acquire competent conciliators, mediators, and competent arbitrators. But there are some wonderful examples in bargaining councils of very successful dispute resolution provisions. So you get it in road freight, you get it in the MEIBC, in the Motor Bargaining Council, where they have very skilled panels of mediators and very skilled panels of arbitrators who deal with all of the unfair dismissal disputes, all of the unfair labour practice disputes, and a lot of the interest disputes in a particular industry. And they're able to afford better qualified dispute resolvers than perhaps reside in the CCMA. And really one of the things that we don't give ourselves sufficient recognition for is the degree to which South Africa has provided access to justice for the poorest worker on the shop floor, the very thing that workers in 1922 didn't have. We have managed to provide through the bargaining council system and eventually the CCMA. The other thing is that there are some good examples where bargaining councils have been used as a forum for the captains of industry to meet with the union leaders to formulate policy for that industry. And many of our industries are in crisis at the moment. And for example, the mining industry could have done a lot better than it has done had it been able to address some of the policy issues like transformation and the crises that have faced the mining industry worldwide at a very high level policy engagement. And I think that we've forgotten about that. But in the early days, that used to happen. The captains of industry would sit across the table from people, and even post in the lead up to 94 and shortly thereafter, you had people like Cyril Ramaphosa sitting at the table with Bobby Godsell. Yes. You seldom have that happening any longer. So we could use bargaining councils for that purpose. So yes, there's a lot of good. What we've got to do is try to work out what's not working and take it out, work out what works and emphasize that, and come with a reformed bargaining council arrangement which gets the best out of the system. Another benefit, Wynand, that I think a lot of people don't appreciate is the role of agreement enforcement across the industry. For example, it's very, very difficult for a government to enforce a national minimum wage. It's easy to talk about it at a high level. It's another thing to implement it, because you have to have thousands of inspectors paid for by the state to go and do that. One of the advantages of bargaining council minimum wage and working condition fixing is, firstly, those minima are agreed to by the majority of employers and unions in the industry, and provided it's flexible enough, going back to my earlier point, it gives you a fair playing field that every employer in the industry is paying the same wage, and the inspector and the enforcement of those agreements ensures that all the companies are playing according to the same rules, and one is not undercutting the other. And to do that at a industry level, financed by the industry, because remember, the bargaining councils are financed by the employers in the industry, and employees, makes for more efficient enforcement of minimum wages and working conditions. And it also is a great help to employers. Can consult with inspectors to find out what must I pay this worker and what hours of work must I do. It's a resource that's readily available to them. So yes, there's a lot of benefit in that as well.
Good.